All right, we're back at it. Thanks for joining today on the DU Sports Podcast. I'm Caleb Turner, joined by our favorite Argentine and Messi superfan, Josh Ellis. Did I see him hint the other day that he might be coming to MLS one day?
Yeah, actually, David Beckham announced that he's finally got his team in Miami ready to go. So you never know. Messi left him a little message that said, "Hey, a couple years, hit me up." And could you imagine Messi coming to Salt Lake City to play RSL? I would be there in a heartbeat.
That would be big. But back to what's going on down here in Provo. It's been a busy week in BYU sports. Well, it seems like our good luck charm wore off a little bit, and men's basketball dropped their first game since we started this podcast. Jock Lando was too much to handle as St. Mary's trounced the Cougars 75-62. BYU bounced back with a solid 80-65 win over Pacific, getting revenge on a Tigers team that beat them 2 weeks previous. The boys hit the road this week to take on LMU and number 14 Gonzaga at the Kennel. We'll see if they can keep their streak alive and win their fourth straight in Spokane.
Women's hoops came away with the win over St. Mary's, but lost to Pacific on the road on Saturday. A solid 7-3 conference record has the Cougars in second place, with a big one against first place Gonzaga at the Marriott Center this Saturday. Nationally, the team ranks 7th in block shots and 8th in block shots per game. Senior guard Cassie Broadhead-Devassery ranks 5th in free throws made and 6th in minutes played. Freshman center Sarah Hampson ranks 2nd in block shots per game and 3rd in block shots.
Number 5 men's volleyball lost 2 in a row last week to number 6 UC Irvine, dropping them to a number 6 ranking. They return home to the Smithfield House to take on number 14 UC Santa Barbara Friday and Saturday. Number 22 gymnastics earned a season-high 196.450 score in their victory over Air Force this weekend. They travel to Denver this week in an effort to extend their win streak to 4 meets. Now, going back to volleyball for a second, it's been kind of an up and down season so far. The high was very high with a win over number 1 Ohio State, but then we dropped two in a row to UC Irvine, and that season opener loss to Loyola Chicago is still a tough stain. With about a week left before conference play begins, how big are these next couple games, Josh?
I feel the Cougars really need a sweep after last week, like you said, dropped both games to UC Irvine. Second one in 5 sets, but still, just to have back-to-back losses is never a fun thing. So this week they've got a chance at 2 top 15 wins at home, which would be huge, and it would definitely help the Cougars come tournament selection time. And obviously the polls will change over the year, but with everything as is, the Cougars still have shots against number 2, 3, 8, 10, and 13 this year, most of those coming in conference play. And so the Cougars definitely have chances to impress the committee. Obviously, the goal is to go win the MPSF tournament and just get that automatic bid and get into the tournament. But one thing that stood out to me so far from this season, the Cougars are 2-0 in sweeps. They are 1-2 in 4-game sets or 4-game matches, and then they're 1-2 in 5-set games. So as games have dragged out, and that one win in a 5-set was against Ohio State. So
Yeah.
a good win, but it seems as these games drag out, the Cougars tend to struggle. So hopefully they can turn that around with conference just around the corner and improve.
Gotcha. And we'll be sure to hammer out more of those details and look at their tournament chances as conference play gets going here in the next couple weeks. Men's basketball has their road to the NCAA tournament narrower than ever right now, with little to no margin of error in their remaining games. St. Mary's has proven too difficult to beat this season, so a WCC tournament victory seems unlikely. If by some miracle the Cougars are able to win out this season, reaching a 26-5 record, do they get the at-large bid, Josh?
I'm going to say no. Honestly, until this team can prove me wrong, I just don't see it happening. And obviously, I want them to. Obviously, I would love to see the Cougars back in the big dance, and that's the team's goal. That's what they said at the start of the year. We need to get back to the big dance. So it's an achievable goal. But right now, history tells us that BYU is likely to have another bad loss here in the second half of conference play. Last year, it was a 13-point loss at San Diego in the first half, similar to the Pacific loss this year. And then it was a 16-point loss at Pepperdine down the stretch. That kind of was the nail in the coffin. The year before that, it was another loss at Pepperdine and then a home loss to Pacific on the back end. And then the year before that, again, a loss at San Diego and Pepperdine. So Cougars are actually on a 3-game losing streak at Pepperdine right now.
But also a 3-game winning streak at Gonzaga, so it balances out.
It balances out. And the biggest problem with that is that Gonzaga win isn't a a top 10 win like it has been. Last year, take down the number 1 team. Obviously, at that point, the Cougars were out of the discussion there. If you had that number 1 win this year, definitely puts them into that at-large conversation. But right now, it would still be, top 15 wins against the Zags. But you look at the rest of the Cougars' resume, and the Princeton win. Honestly, actually, the UVU win is more valuable to the Cougars than the Princeton win right now. UVU is 96th in the Ken Palm rankings, 93 in ESPN's BPI. Princeton's down to 125th and 109 in those rankings. So the quality wins just are there. Utah's still a good win and improving. They've taken down a couple of top 25 teams there in the Pac-12. But beyond that, some sub 150 losses are tough. It's just you look at the Cougars' resume and you don't see much. You see okay wins. You don't see terrible losses. And like I said, that back half of conference has been tough. And this year we play at Pepperdine and then at San Diego back-to-back, February 15th and 17th. That scares me. That road trip could really be the thing that slips BYU up, even if they get the win at Gonzaga this week.
Yeah. Like you mentioned, 5 of their last 8 of this season are going to be on the road, only 3 home games left. It's going to be a steep uphill climb. But on the positive side of things, bracketologist Joe Lunardi, when asked if sweeping Gonzaga gets BYU into the discussion, he said, quote, "Yes, and we know they play well in Spokane," end quote. So, anything is possible if BYU can pull out this win against Gonzaga this weekend. But like I said earlier, the tournament possibility isn't looking likely this year. Hopefully, we can at least get to the final. We'll see what our matchups look like in the first couple of rounds. But it'll definitely be an interesting discussion as we get going here and closer to the end of conference play. And I guess just one question, in the context of the WCC. Could the WCC be a 3-bid league as far as the NCAA tournament goes?
Yeah, and I definitely think, if the miracle of all miracles and it's BYU winning a conference tournament in Vegas happens, for sure. Like, that definitely turns the WCC into a 3-bid league. With it, if it plays out like it has the past few years with Gonzaga or St. Mary's taking that conference title crown, BYU sweeping Gonzaga, like Lenardi said, could get us into the discussion. And I think you'd have to tack on an appearance in the final of the tournament for BYU just to be in the conversation. I just think it's going to be super tough, especially with the parity that we've seen in some of the other conferences this year, where you've got top 25 teams taking losses pretty much every week. That other teams that are in a similar position to BYU have those marquee wins, which the Cougars just don't have right now, and that is just a tough thing to overcome when it comes to Selection Sunday.
And if nothing else, we can at least say that we are the kings of Utah this season, right? We beat every other team in Utah, so at least we have that consolation prize, even if we don't get to the tournament. Looking forward to that Gonzaga game this Saturday. In the past, an interesting story, the Gonzaga fans have dressed up like LDS missionaries to mock BYU, but this year the administration has asked them not to, due in part to return missionary Jesse Wade on this year's team, so kind of an interesting tidbit as far as that game this weekend goes. Now let's move over to women's hoops for a second here. Despite a rough preseason, the women's basketball team sits in second place in the WCC and have a chance to knock off first place Gonzaga this Saturday. So, maybe having watched this team a couple times and, knowing how good this Gonzaga team is, what's it really going to take for the Lady Cougars to take down the Bulldogs this weekend?
I think if they can come out with a strong perimeter game, when they've been able to knock down 3-pointers, this team is dangerous. Excuse me. If they can really attack that from the outside, that'll be a huge win. And like we mentioned earlier, the inside presence of Sarah Hampson has been huge. And so if they can utilize that to shut down any paint attacking by the Zags and kind of disrupt their offense that way, I definitely feel like BYU can have a good shot at knocking off Gonzaga. In the standings, Cougars are 3 games back of Gonzaga right now. So win does a big part in getting the Cougars back into potentially knocking off Gonzaga. They still have to play them twice. Obviously Gonzaga will have to slip up somewhere else along the way to make it a challenge. But crazier things have happened.
Right. Yeah, I think kind of like you said, the answer here is 3 and D, right? The 3-pointers in the defense. They've proven that's kind of their identity for the Cougars this season is knocking down those open shots, getting hot from the perimeter, and hanging their head on defense. Like Josh mentioned, with the big presence of Sarah Hampson down low. Brenda Chase, sophomore guard, leads the team in steals, and she's also second in scoring. So they've really had a lot of help from their guards. Malia Nawahine, who's coming up later in our show, she's been big as a graduate transfer out of Utah. Her, Brennan Chase, and Devashrey have been lighting it up from 3. So if they can keep that coming, if they can, get that ball movement going and hit those shots consistently, and then get back on the other end and play solid defense like they've been these past few games, anything can happen. We'll see what happens this weekend with when Gonzaga comes to Provo. Next up, we have our guest interview with a women's basketball player, Malia Nawahine. She is a graduate transfer from the University of Utah and has been an important piece in this year's team, winning WCC Player of the Week on January 8th. All right, we're here with Malia Nawahine from the women's basketball team. So, Malia, you're a transfer from the University of Utah, right? So, just first of all, what's been the hardest adjustment, maybe coming from the U down here to BYU?
The hardest thing is probably leaving my old team, my teammates from Utah and my family.
Gotcha. And what have you liked most or noticed most about BYU, either as a university or just as a team? What's kind of stood out to you the most?
What I really like is that my religion is incorporated with my school. I really like that. And then for basketball, I love my coaches and my teammates here. So.
Awesome. And as far as the rivalry between Utah and BYU, does everybody get on board pretty quick, or are some of the players, they don't see it as such a big deal as maybe some of the fans do?
I really think it is a very big deal, especially since I came from there. All of my teammates this year, I felt like they played for me.
Yeah.
So that made it even more important to us.
That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, super cool. And as far as like this year's team goes, what do you feel is kind of your role on the squad as a player?
Well, I am a senior. There's 3 of us, and we're the oldest for sure, and then the next is the sophomore, so I kind of see myself as one of the leaders, I guess, and Jenny has asked me to take on that role. And then on the court, I feel like my role is to play the defense, just do my job pretty much.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And how have you guys been able to grow and develop, or what's changed the most as you guys have gone through this season?
This season has had a lot of ups and downs, for sure. But I think to start with, it's kind of hard because there's so many people, including myself, kind of have to get used to playing with each other. And I think we've gotten a lot better at that. You can tell, and we're hopefully keep getting better at that.
Awesome. And, as you're approaching this game against Gonzaga this week, they're first in the conference, what's it going to take for you guys to beat them this Saturday?
Playing as a team. I think we just lost to Pacific, and I think that's where we shied away from that and kind of separated a little bit, played for ourselves. So I think if we play as a team and trust each other on the court, I think we'll be good.
Awesome. This last one's just kind of a fun question. What's your pump-up jam before every game?
Oh.
It's the song you listen to that just really gets you ready.
Justin Bieber. I listen before every game.
Any song specifically?
I listen to Baby lately, his old jams.
Not what I expected, but okay.
Yeah.
Classic, old Justin Bieber hits.
Yep.
All right, I can dig it. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming.
Thank you guys.
Good luck this week with your games. Well, that'll do it for us on this week's DU Sports Podcast. Thanks for being with us, Josh. And thanks for joining in. Join us next week as we discuss our Oscar predictions. Sweet.